Every year, the West Bloomfield Township Public Library, along with libraries across southeastern Michigan, sponsor Everyone's Reading. Now in its 14th year, Everyone's Reading promotes community dialogue through the shared experience of discussing the same book. This year's selection was The Inner Circle by Brad Meltzer. Brad Meltzer, a proud alumnus of the University of Michigan, is an accomplished author, comic book writer, and the host of 2 shows on the History Channel. A master of asking questions, the tables were turned on him for the 2015 Everyone's Reading finale held at the Jewish Community Center of Metro Detroit. And now, the West Bloomfield Township Public Library and Civic Center TV present Everyone's Reading with Brad Meltzer.
The 2015 Everyone's Reading selection is the first book of your Culper Ring trilogy. It's The Inner Circle, but you got the idea for these Culper Ring stories from something that happened when you got a call from Homeland Security after 9/11.
Yes, so this is crazy, okay? And the level of crazy. I get a call at home from the Department of Homeland Security asking me to come in and brainstorm different ways that terrorists could attack the United States. And my first thought is, if they're calling me, we have bigger problems than anybody thinks, right? I'm like, we're screwed. But I was honored to be part of what they call the Red Cell program. They said they were bringing together out-of-the-box thinkers, or as I like to call them, crazy people. And they would pair me with a Secret Service agent and a chemist, and they would give us a target like Detroit. And they would ask us to destroy it, and we would destroy Detroit in an hour. I'd come up with my crazy way in. The Secret Service guy would have his way through security. The chemist they would pair me with would say, let's use this chemical, it'll dissipate less quickly in the air. And you don't go home feeling good that day, you go home terrified. Because, right, you see how easy it is to kill us. But all I could ask myself was, why me? They can have anyone they want. Why did they pick an author who writes fiction? And I traced it back through history to a man named George Washington. Because George Washington had his own secret spy ring made up of regular, ordinary citizens. And why? Because Washington realized that no one looks twice at an ordinary person. And I love that. Right? I love that idea. So I said to my friend in Homeland Security, wouldn't it be cool if you found out in my next novel that George Washington's spy ring still exists to this very day? And he said to me, what makes you think it doesn't? Ooh. And I was like, I'm stealing that idea for a book. And that's where The Inner Circle came from. And usually I can pinpoint the idea where that book comes from. So there's that, and I was in a room called a SCIF at the National Archives. The SCIF is a room where you read top secret documents. And so they put me in this room, and it has steel reinforced walls. If it has a window, it vibrates so no one can see in, because you don't read a top secret document at your desk, right? You want to be somewhere safe so no one can see it. It makes sure that the air conditioning duct doesn't connect to any other ducts, like so Tom Cruise can't come in on his trapeze, right, and lower in and steal your stuff. And I can pinpoint right there, I knew that's going to be the opening scene of The Inner Circle, and that's where I'm going to start. But I will say for the new book, for The President's Shadow, I can't pinpoint the moment because I just woke up with it. I woke up with the idea. And I woke up one morning, I said, here's the First Lady. She's in the Rose Garden. She's at the White House. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. She has no idea, no one's around, so she's just happy to have some peace. Every First Lady I've ever met, they just want normalcy again. And so she loves gardening. She puts her hands into the dirt. She smells the mulch. And out of the dirt, she pulls a severed arm. Ooh. And she has no idea how it got there, doesn't know how they got past security, and certainly doesn't know that in the fist of that arm that there's a hidden puzzle that's going to be solved. And my wife is like, you have the creepiest dreams of all time. And I was like, you can say whatever you want. I don't have to work today. I'm done. I've done my work for today. And obviously, when I wake up, it's never that formed, right? It's never, I'm giving you the formed version, but I did have, here's a severed arm, and here it is buried in the White House. And what I do, the first thing is I can make up whatever I want. That's fiction. But the fun part to me is I go to the real Secret Service, and I say, what would you do if this was a real crime you were investigating? And the first thing they said to me is, I'd redecorate a room in the White House. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Why would you do that? And they said, think of it. They said, if I take some wallpaper, pull it off a wall, I put some paint on another wall, now I can get the first family to move out across the street to Blair House for a couple days. And now I can investigate whatever I want in the White House, and the press has no idea what I'm doing, and no one's the wiser. And I'm like, that sounds like something you've done before. And he said, now think of this. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama have all redecorated rooms in the White House. You would not believe what's been done here in the name of home renovation. And I'm like, thank you for chapter 3 and chapter 4 and chapter 5. So that's where the President's Shadow starts.
And speaking of first ladies wanting normalcy, I have to say, I read the acknowledgments, don't you all? Who do writers acknowledge? It is not often when a writer says basically, hey, thank you, President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, and First Lady Barbara Bush, and First Lady Laura Bush. So you acknowledge them. How did that relationship begin with the Bushes?
Yeah, so I've gotten letters over the years. When Bill Clinton was president, he wrote me a couple times saying he read the books because he's a big mystery reader. And then I live in Florida, moved back to Florida, and one day I opened the mail, and there's a letter it says from President Bush, from Senior, the dad, H.W. Bush. And when I actually was my freshman year at Michigan, I can tell you that my first job was at the Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C. I was an intern. And we used to take the pen signing machines, and we take the stationery from the Judiciary Committee, and I'd write to my friend Lee Benjamin and tell him he was being deported, you know? And that works too. It really does work. And so I thought for sure this is a joke played back by my friends. This is a fake letter from a fake president. And in fact, I was so convinced it was fake that I called the office and I said, yeah, someone here wants a book because he wanted a book signed. And they said, oh, you got the president's book. And I was like, oh, it's real. And I said, I eventually got to meet him, and I said, sir, can I come see what your life is like? I said, I want to see what it's like to be the leader of the free world one day, and the next day you have to stop at red lights like the rest of us. And he said, why don't you come to Houston for the week? And I was like, wow, he's really bored, right? I mean, he has nothing to do but talk to me. But obviously, it wound up being the start of this amazing friendship. George Bush spent the first 5 minutes we were there trying to convince my wife that he invented the phrase, you the man. I'm like, that's a really A+ joke. It's a good joke. And in fact, I will tell you, so they've been very kind. I will tell you that one of the things that I got to do last weekend was I got invited to Barbara Bush's 90th birthday party. Okay, and so they basically, it was all for literacy. It's a bipartisan event, and we raised $17 million for literacy. And so what happens at the end, you know, they basically call me in the beginning of it, and they say, we got, you know, Mrs. Bush and her staff picked 4 authors to entertain. Picked them personally. And I'm like, wow, who'd you get? And they're like, dummy, it's you. And I was like, okay, I'll be there. So we go to Kennebunkport last weekend, and at one point we're sitting in a room. I mean, each room is like as big as this riser here. And between the 2.5 and there's one more room after that, there's George Bush and Barbara Bush. There's Laura Bush and George W. Bush. Then there's Jeb Bush. There's myself and my wife. The Bush twin girls are running around here with their one of them has a daughter now. And my wife looks at me, she's like, at what point did your life become Forrest Gump? Like, right? And so we're there, because you can't take it that seriously, right? And in fact, my wife is on her phone, and she's reading the front page of the New York Times that day, and it says, Jeb Bush has just left for Europe, that he's going on a listening tour. And she's like, no, he's not. He's right here. And she says, Governor, it says you left. And he's like, I know, I'm leaving after the party. And it's one of those moments where you're like, here's the news. And here's the news right here. And the best part of the whole thing is we're in this little tiny space, and someone smashes into my wife. And when someone kind of hits you by accident, because this is just for like a small reception to thank the people who were, you know, kind of entertaining and things. And my wife immediately spins around, and she comes nose to nose with George W. Bush. And now I'm like, this is going to be the greatest fight of all time. Like, this is going to be the most, I can't wait. And luckily, punches were not thrown, and we did get out of there. But it's been an amazing friendship, and he's helped me with books. So we just got, when I was researching this new book, In the President's Shadow, there's a scene you'll see where Beecher gets to go into Secret Service headquarters. And when you get to that scene, it's because I went to Secret Service headquarters, and they take me inside to headquarters, and they have a little room in the back that's basically a museum. And they have badges, and they have guns, and they have a big framed JFK dead newspaper. I mean, it's really macabre things to keep. But one of the things I was amazed by is, you know, I'm looking around the room, and I'm just amazed at all these things they have, including the door, and a picture of the door of the car that Ronald Reagan was shot when the assassination attempt happened. And one of the men from the Secret Service says, Brad, you want to hear a cool story? When the Secret Service says to you, do you want to hear a good story? Yes is the right answer, right? So I say, yeah, I want to hear a good story. And he says, here's the story. He says, when Ronald Reagan was president, he used to sometimes carry a gun with him. And I'm like, that's not true. And he says, yeah, it was a .38. He would put it in his briefcase to hide it. And then he would sometimes take it on Air Force One. I'm like, if Ronald Reagan did not have a Western and he was not on a Western before, if you're a sitting president and you carry a gun, you get automatically a Western. They give you one. I think they honestly give you as a president. And I was struck by it, but the first thing I did is I contacted President Bush Sr., his vice president, right? And I said, sir, I heard this story, and listen, if Reagan had a gun, you must have something really cool. And usually I ask questions of him. He's helped me with 4 books now. And this was the first time he ever asked a question back. And his question basically is, I want to hear more about that Reagan gun thing, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, you didn't know. And so nicely, the good part is it's been verified by another Reagan biographer last week, and then another Secret Service agent came forward and said, you know, I got it right, and which is really nice. But the one thing I did find out, I was like, sir, what'd you have in your pockets? And he said the only thing he carried while he was president in his pockets, he would carry his driver's license. And I was like, it's amazing really, because the Secret Service doesn't let a president drive, right? So I was like, are you worried about being carded? Like, are you at a bar? Is he can't get into Charlie's? Like, what is the story? But that's what he carried. And Bill Clinton used to carry a billfold. And the billfold used to have a picture of Hillary, picture of Chelsea, and also a prayer to just, I guess, be mindful. Got to respect that. George W. Bush used to carry a badge of a 9/11 police officer who died in 9/11, a guy named George Howard. Again, got to respect that. If a family member says, don't forget my family member, and he carries his badge with him for 8 years. And President Obama today always carries, people know his BlackBerry, sometimes has a little pad he writes on. But also I respect that he carries the things people give him. When someone gives him a coin or a present, instead of just tossing it and giving it to the library and the archives, he keeps them in his pocket, which I respect. He doesn't carry a wallet, though. So he's been known to say, like the rest of us, where's my money? Which I just love, that you can be the leader of the free world and as clueless as the rest of us looking for your cash. But I also, the one thing that every president carries, I found out from very good sources, is a little card that clicks open and gives you the codes for the nuclear arsenal.
Whoa.
Whoa is right.
Whoa. But I love these anecdotes that you're getting and this information you're getting, because I come away with a sense of these presidents not as these political creations, but as humans. And before we get into the next thing I want to talk about, please share the story of the notes in the desk, because that touched me so much, that these presidents are people caring about each other.
Listening, and that's all I can write, right? I'm not a powerful person. I'm an outsider. That's what I always was. My family lied about when my dad lost his job when he was 39 years old. He moved everything from Brooklyn, New York to Miami, Florida. And he had no job, we had no place to live. And he said it was the do-over of life at 39. He had $1,200 to his name. And we lived for months with my grandmother because he couldn't even save enough for the down payment to get a new apartment. And so they gave a fake address so I could go to the local wealthy public school. And it was in this school that I saw people went to go to a thing called college. And they were taking something called the SAT. They're like, you taking it, Brad? I'm like, I don't even know what that is. But I took it. And because I gave this fake address, I went to it. I remember being in this school and feeling like there's this whole world of amazing things, and I was the outsider. That's still how I feel today. It's a perspective I write from, but all I can find is the humanity of it, and that's how I can write a president. So one of the things I found out is that Ronald Reagan, on his last moments in the Oval Office before he left, wrote a note that said, don't let the turkeys get you down. And he put the note into the desk and left it for George H.W. Bush. And when Bush left office, he wrote a note and left it for Clinton. Clinton left one for W. W leaves one for Obama. It's the greatest hidden tradition of the modern presidency.
I love it.
And great, right? And I love that. And I was doing this thing on the Culper ring on George Washington's secret spy ring, passing from generation to generation. So I asked President Bush, could you leave a secret message and a secret code in those notes you leave for one another? And that's how you find out that George Washington's spy ring still exists to this very day. And my email pops up, and it says, the president wants you to have this. And I look at the attachment, and what George Bush had sent me that no one had ever seen publicly was the secret letter he left for Bill Clinton. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, this has a secret code in it, right? I check it for Freemason codes. I check to see if the third letter of every word spelled out, I hate you, Bill. I was like, what's in this thing, right? And the truth was, it was nothing. It was completely generous, an amazing letter, and you can read it on my website in entirety, but it basically is like, I'm rooting for you and the country's rooting for you. And in this moment where he hates Bill Clinton, probably more than any other time, right? Man makes you a one-term president, and you get kicked out of the greatest job on earth. And he just says, I'm so excited for you, and I wish you only good things. And that, to me, is a sign of class. And I appreciate that. But I love that I got to, in fact, the only thing that was better than that is Bush's biographer, who did a book of his letters, was like, sir, why did you not give me that? Why did you give it to the fiction guy?
Very good. Your writing, Brad, has taken you on a lot of different paths, including comic books. I know my son just... You're talking to Brad Meltzer because he's a big Justice League of America fan. You've written Green Arrow, but also you've written some very inspiring children's books. You've got the Heroes for My Son, Heroes for My Daughter, and then the I Am series, where you tell children about the lives of Abraham Lincoln, Amelia Earhart, Rosa Parks, Albert Einstein, Jackie Robinson. What set you in that direction, writing for the children?
Yeah.
Apart from the great class you took.
No, I appreciate it. So, listen, I love that I get to write my thrillers. I love that we get to do a TV show. And listen, the show is called Brad Meltzer's Decoded. That's the greatest title of all time, right? I said to my wife, honey, what are we having for Brad Meltzer's dinner tonight? Because yesterday we had Brad Meltzer's chicken, and tonight I'd like to have Brad Meltzer's pasta. And she was like, you can go sleep on Brad Meltzer's couch. And you're laughing, but you don't know my wife. And I love that I get to do that. And obviously you mentioned the comic books.
Yes.
I mean, there are days I get to write Batman, and I get to put words in Batman's mouth. I'm so excited on those days. I wear my underwear on the outside of my pants, right? Utility belt and all. I'm ready to go. But the one that I love doing are these kids' books. And what happened was I had my own kids. And I said, you know what? I'm tired of my kids looking at reality TV show stars and loudmouth athletes and thinking that's a hero. And I tell them all the time, that's fame. And being famous is very different than being a hero. And so we did a book called I'm Amelia Earhart, and one I Am Abraham Lincoln. We did I Am Rosa Parks, I Am Albert Einstein. We did I Am Jackie Robinson. And I love that we put these books out there. And I can tell you that the next book comes out in 3 weeks. On July 14th, we're doing I Am Lucille Ball.
Oh!
And people said to me, why are you doing Lucy? You did Rosa Parks, I get you did Amelia. Why are you doing Lucy? And I said, you know what? I want my daughter to have an entertainment hero who isn't famous because she's thin and pretty. I want her to have the message. Lucy doesn't just stand for that it's okay to be different. She stands for the fact that it's fantastic to be different. In fact, being different is the very best part of all of us and who we are. It's the only thing all of us in this room have in common, is that we're all different. You look at Charleston, South Carolina, which, again, differences are used for hatred. Differences are amazing. They're truly the one thing we all have in common and can find common ground on. And differences are what make us beautiful and need to be celebrated. And I wanted my daughter to have that. And Lucy she's different than every other woman before her in entertainment. She is the first woman to ever run her own studio. She produces little shows called Star Trek and Mission Impossible. You know how much nerd goodness that alone gives me? And I love that we get to give her Lucille Ball. In fact, when you get to the page of the chalk conveyor belt, the entire book goes black and white. Right. Which I love that I was like, come on, we're not doing this. We got to do it right. And then the book after that in September is I'm Helen Keller. And I love that we did the Abraham Lincoln book. But I will say this Helen Keller book is special because when I do a kid's book, I tell the artist exactly what to draw. I say, the camera's on the ground, a worm's eye view looking up at Amelia Earhart. She points at the sky and we see the sky above her, just the expanding outward and outward like it's the greatest adventure to happen soon. And I drive them crazy because I tell them every angle, every turn, and Chris Eliopoulos, our amazing artist, always surpasses what I say. But every once in a while, you'll get art that just is beyond what either of you could do on your own. And that's what happened with Helen Keller. So when you get to the pages where she goes blind, the pages are actually both black. And it says, this is how I see the world. And then it says, cover your ears. This is how I hear the world. And then when it goes to where she learns how to read, we put real Braille into the book. And it says, feel these dots? This is my name. My name is Helen. What's your name? And on the next page, it says, find your name right here. And there's the Braille alphabet is there, and your kids can find and touch the letters and find their own name. And I knew we were onto something because my oldest son is 13 years old, and he once said to me, "Dad, I hate to read." And I was like, "You know what I do for a living, right? You know that's what the job that feeds us is." But I caught him reading an early copy of the book. And he was like, "Dad, this is the one. There's something special about this one." And after that one, after Helen Keller, we do I Am Martin Luther King Jr. And listen, I love doing these books, but to me, it's never been about a book. It's so that we can help you build a library for your kids and your grandkids and your nieces and your nephews of real heroes that you can give them. And every stop we've had so far, we sell out of the kids' books. And it's not because I'm the great writer and they're so good, but it's because I know that all of you, like me, we're all starving for great heroes for our kids. And so I love that people are buying them, stacks of them for their schools, for their libraries, for homeless shelters. It's incredible. But what these books are, they're my core belief. I believe ordinary people change the world. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care how much money you make. That is all nonsense to me. I believe in regular people and their ability to affect change in this world. And it's why I believe in that first hero we talked about, Superman. The most important part of the story is not Superman. The most important part of the story is Clark Kent. And you know why? Because we're all Clark Kent. We all know what it's like to be boring and ordinary and wish we could do something incredibly beyond ourselves. But we all can do something incredibly beyond ourselves. And in fact, I can tell you, all you got to do is help one person, be kind to one person, do something good for one person. And for me, I know that this is part of my legacy. And I think the best review I've ever gotten came from all these moms and dads last Halloween who wrote me letters that said, "Dear Brad, this year my daughter didn't go as a princess. Thanks to you, she went as Amelia Earhart." And that is just the most amazing review you can get.
It's cool, as you mentioned, letters that people send you. So you get the emails, you do your own tweets. If you follow my Twitter, that's him. It's not a publicist. And you read the letters that people send you. So you're
we have a little collecting the costumes now. It's pretty incredible.
It's pretty cool. Who do you love to read? Whose books can you just not put down?
There's this guy, Brad Meltzer, who sometimes I just watch him on television and read his books, and I have a mirror, and I'm like, "Oh, Meltzer, you've done it again." For me, there's no one that I just read that I feel like everything. I think Alan Moore is one of my favorite writers of all time. I love Neil Gaiman. I think he's terrific. But I read everything. So I read John Green, and I liked Wonder, and I'll read young adult. I don't tend to read thrillers, because it's like a mechanic in a rental car. You don't enjoy the ride, you're just kind of figuring out what's wrong with it. And for me, when I read a thriller, I'll read it for about 100 or 150 pages, and then all I'm doing is going, "Oh, I see what she's doing. That's the killer. That's who she's trying to make us think it is." I'm just taking it apart. But I will say there are books like Gone Girl that I loved. There are big books out there that I do love. But I tend to read much more. I read a lot of young adult, and I read a lot of comics. I just do. And I think that they're just pure. They're just, there's something about when you're young that you don't learn to lie yet. And so there's a purity there that I just will forever enjoy.
Brad, I'm wondering, what is your writing process? And is there a perfect environment that you need to be able to write well in?
The only thing I ask when I write is I like to be in the same place, in the same spot. So I've written, my first book I ever wrote was this really terrible apartment in Boston that we had. And I said I had this little office next to my room, but it was really a closet. And I wrote in the closet for an entire year. It was like Cinderella. And when I was in this closet, there was no windows, and I didn't care. I just need to be in the same spot. And if you put me in the same spot, eventually, I can write here. You put it literally, give me a laptop, and I can write here with you watching. After the first couple of days, I'll be looking at you. But eventually, if you're in the same spot, you'll all disappear, and everything around me will disappear, and my imaginary friends will come sit with me. So eventually I just need to be there in the same space long enough. When my house, we had construction done once, and I wrote the end of a book in a law library in Washington, D.C., because I sat there for 3 months just writing the end of The Millionaires. So as long as it's the same space, I don't care.
Let's get some questions from the audience.
Yeah,
I've got
please.
some more too, but let's take a break and get some of your questions.
And you can ask anything. You can ask TV, you can ask comics, you can ask you can ask about open heart surgery. I write fiction, I'll make up an answer. So
right in the front.
Yeah, yell it out and we'll repeat it.
Okay, will the book on Helen Keller be available in Braille?
That is the question I just asked the publisher. The question is would the book on Helen Keller be available in Braille? And I said, we have to do that. There's not a question we have to do that. And I'm talking, it's funny, you're right on exactly where we were today when I was asking that very question. So thank you. That's a really good question.
I have a friend who's got a 13-year-old daughter.
Yep, no, and we must do that as far as I'm concerned. Yes, sir.
Hi, Brad. Andrew Wooster. So, a question. When are we going to see Beecher on the big screen?
Yes, when are we going to see Beecher on the big screen?
Yeah.
Listen, I would love to do that. Who would it be? The other, of course, someone has to say who would be. So, it's funny. For me, I never cast the characters because I know Beecher. I live with them for 6 years now. It's like asking who would play, your mom in the movie role of your life. Like, it's your mom. No one could ever play her. Meryl Streep. But it's my mom. Come on. It's the mother who said, "What do you mean John Grisham's in the front window?" Not anymore. Now Meltzer's in the front window. It's a Jewish mom, right? You got the power of the Jewish mother. But to me, so Beecher is just Beecher to me. He looks like Beecher. Someone just said to me, though, just wrote to me and said they saw Neil Patrick Harris as Beecher. And usually everyone says, I'm like, that's terrible. But I was like, I see that. I could see that. I'm like, he has like good fussiness about him and seemed to like the arcane, which is what Beecher's obsessed with. So I like that one. But the best part is someone asked me that same question in New York City on the launch of the book tour last week. And I said, you know what, my movie agent happens to be in the front row. And I look down and my agent is literally texting. And I'm like, and that's why there's no movie. You can blame her right there. Like, that's why. So it's great when you can embarrass your agent in front of, hundreds of people. But to me, that's icing on an already great cake. I mean, we would love to do it. Make no mistake. My wife is picking out what she's wearing to the Oscars, But to me, we've had offers to sell books. I've had a TV star fly in on book tour to convince me that he was the person to write and star in the movie version. And this was years ago, 10 years ago. And I just, I guess I could have said yes, but I was like, you know what? I don't think you can write it. And it would be easy for just sign the rights away and try and make a movie, but I think the worst thing you could do is make a bad one. And so I feel like there's offers out that we haven't taken. We did sell the Zero game. It was great because we sold it to this woman, Canty, and I said, I didn't know who she was when I first went into the meeting, so I said, what'd she make? And she said she made a little movie called Schindler's List, and E.T., and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I was like, oh, she's good. So they bought the rights to it, and then they got the screenplay back, and they didn't like the screenplay, and so it just sits on a shelf right now, waiting for another writer to come in, God knows ever, or maybe never ever. But to me, again, icing on a great cake. Thanks, AJ. Yes?
Mr. Meltzer,
Only if you call me Brad, though. I will blush all over you.
Okay. I have never read your book, but I'm a big fan of your TV show. Are you planning on doing anything like that?
Yeah, the question is I hate your books, but you're so handsome, you're on TV. So the question is about the TV show, Lost History and Decoded. So Decoded, they just ran another marathon last week. We are still getting people who love Decoded, and I love that people still love that show. Lost History was the #1 rated news show on H2 last season. We were like having the parade for ourselves. It was all great. And then last month, H2 announced and History Channel announced that they were rebranding the network as Vice, as the Vice Network, and they're now killing the network. So, which is my reaction too, don't worry. So we are now in the process of talking to the History Channel and trying to figure out, are we gonna jump over there, or do we go to another network? Obviously we love doing that. I will tell you the update, the newest update, because it's just an incredible story. So one of the objects that we were looking for was the flag from 9/11. So famously, firefighters at Ground Zero raise the flag, they take a photograph. It becomes one of the most famous photographs 21st century. It's on a postage stamp, it's on newspapers, and the flag then goes missing. And we say to America at the end of the show, please, if you find it, we'd like it back. And after the show airs, right after it airs, a former Marine walks into a fire station in Washington State. And he says, I can't tell you where I got this, I can't tell you my name, but this flag is the flag from Ground Zero, and you need to have it back. And so the fire department calls the police department, who contacts us. And we contact the owners of the flag. There's this really nice Greek couple who can identify the flag, and they say to us, Spiros, who's the husband of the husband-wife team, basically says to us that there are other markings on the flag. There's one other marking that he's never told anyone about. So if it comes back, he can identify it, and he's never told anyone because he doesn't want anyone to fake it. And so we're like, that's great. as the last episode of Lost History airs, Spiros has a heart attack and dies. Oh. He literally has a stroke. And the good news is he actually did tell someone before he died. He apparently told another relative. They're doing forensic testing on it now. It's been taking a while. I know on CSI, forensic testing takes during the commercial break. It takes a little longer in real life, but we are waiting for results right now. The point really being that whether there's a show or not, we're still looking for this. We're still on it, and I'm still getting updates. We have tips on every single item that we went looking for, on every one. And I hope we can continue telling those stories. They're obviously really fun.
That is great.
Thank you, yes. You clap for the guy who says he doesn't read the books? That's you.
I've read all your books.
I appreciate it.
I also was a huge fan of Jack and Bobby.
So there's the one other person who watched Jack and Bobby. One time when they gave us the reviews from Jack and Bobby, they said, "Oh, you got a 4 share," and I was like, "Oh, a 4 share," and they were like, "No, 4 people." It's 1 and 2 and my mom and anyway.
I thought Jack and Bobby was the most intelligent television ever written.
I appreciate it.
And any ideas to maybe put it in a written format?
Yeah, you know, we actually talked about doing Jack and Bobby novels. There was a while where we were supposed to do Jack and Bobby, for those who didn't see it, because let's face it, nobody watched it, was a TV show that we had on the WB. I can tell you that right after we were on the WB, they shut the WB network. And right after I was on H2, they're shutting the H2 network. I've taken down 2 networks all by myself. And I was going to say, yes, thank you to go on Fox. Yes, nice. Love that. That was fast, people. I got to clap it up for that. I admire quick wit, and that was fast. So I'm stealing that joke for the next city. I promise you. St. Louis, that joke is going to kill tomorrow night. And I love that we did the show. The show was great. The show was great because, I don't know if you've seen, but you know, the people that were in that show, there was a guy named Bradley Cooper was on the show. We had Christine Lottie. We had basically the cast of Mad Men, you know, Jessica Paré and Matt Long, who were both on Mad Men till the end. Logan Lerman is now the lightning thief. And in fact, the writers from Jack and Bobby are everywhere. The reason why, if you watch the TV show Arrow on the CW, the reason you see all the villains reading my novels is because Mark Guggenheim, who runs that show, was in the writer's room with Jack and Bobby with me. So as far as I'm concerned, Arrow is the greatest show on television because all the characters are reading my books. So I would love to go back to it. I'm still waiting. You know, I'm still surprised they haven't put it on DVD. But I will say, if you like Decoded or if you like Lost History or Jack and Bobby, I know it sounds silly, but put it on Twitter and say so, and tag the WB or tag the CW and tag History Channel, because I'm in their offices and they tell me, they're like, you know, people still ask for Decoded on Twitter. They pay attention to it when it's tagged to their @ sign. So I highly encourage, if you want more of it, ask for it.
Brad, we want to talk a little with you about your love of libraries, because it's something that is clearly near and dear to your heart. You're involved in a campaign to get Americans to contact their lawmakers to keep libraries funded. Everyone's Reading is, of course, hosted by a consortium of public libraries, and you said, without librarians, I would not be an author today, and you explained how you were able to get into libraries and open your mind up to this whole world that you never knew when you were a kid.
Yeah, so you heard my introduction, and it's no exaggeration. We didn't have hardcover books in my house. My mom read 2 things, The Star and The Inquirer, right? She was like, all the real news is in here. And my parents basically read 7 books in their whole life, my 7. That's not a joke. They really read 7 books. They were all mine. And we didn't have hardcover books. What we had, my grandmother had a library card. And I remember her taking me to the Brooklyn Public Library, and the librarian said, this is your section. And I really thought she meant this was my section. And I met all my favorite new friends there, Judy Blume and you know, Agatha Christie, and all these amazing writers who I fell in love with and changed my life. And I always say, I'll never know who that librarian is, but I wish I could find her and thank her, because that woman changed my life and would always show me and give me a new book and a new Judy Blume and a new something. And I've met these people now. I've met these authors. But really, when I was growing up, that library was just vital. It made the entire world bigger right in front of me. So I owe librarians for life, and thanks to everyone who's involved with literacy. Obviously, this program here is incredible. This is a community coming together for what? Not for a sports, victory parade, not because it's, some kind of nonsense political thing, but for reading. That's a miracle to me, especially in modern times where everything's getting cut. So thank you for all of you who come here and support this and support your community.
What challenges, Brad, do you see ahead, looking ahead into the 21st century for the community library?
You know, I think the hardest part of the community library is simply funding. That's it. Because what happens is the funding gets cut, and they just say, well, no one checked. And the hard part is technology seems to be in an argument. It makes it look like it's on their side, because they say, well, listen, no one's even reads a book anymore. When was the last time you checked out a book? And people go, yeah, you know, I haven't been to the library in forever, and we don't need libraries, and because you can get it online. Except you forget that there are entire whole neighborhoods, you know, again, especially here, that library is the only place there is a computer, is the only place you can look for job notices, is the only place. I remember studying for the LSAT in my library, because I didn't have a big house where I could be quiet. That was the one place I had that was my refuge, was a public library. I was 23 years old at that point and still needed it. So it's never just about checking out the book. It's an entire community experience, and so many people need it. But I think what happens is you watch politicians saying, nobody reads books anymore, books are dying, you can get it online, we can download it, we don't need staff. And that's a real threat to libraries today.
And you're throwing down the gauntlet, really, to everyone who cares about libraries and about books to make sure that we let our voices be heard.
I mean, seriously, you have to. When you know, again, I know it's so silly, but we did it in Florida. They said they were going to cut these X number of libraries, and we just started people, again, on Facebook, just said, do me a favor, here's your congressman's name, write him a letter. And when they get 10 letters and they get 20 letters, they have to listen. They're like, man, crap, if there's 20 out there, then there's going to be another 20,000 out there. And so then they feel bad, and they don't want to look bad, and so they back away. So I know it sounds so silly to say write your congressman in the modern time. Write your congressman in the modern time. It really matters.
Tell us about the Michigan Easter egg in each of your books.
Oh yeah, I never talk about this anywhere else. This is fun here. So I will tell you that my first novel that I ever wrote, just to go back to it, was about the University of Michigan. That's what it was about. That's all I knew. I graduated, I came here to Michigan, I went to the University of Michigan, I met Amy, and I met Greg, and I met Lee, and I met my friends, and I wrote a book and said, that's interesting, and I wrote about Michigan. Everyone would love that. Who wouldn't want to read, who would want to read that? And again, it got me 24 rejection letters. There were 20 publishers, I got 24 rejection letters. I mean, some people are writing you twice to make sure you get the point. But I was never deterred by that. I was young and naive and determined. And in every book since, you can find a Michigan reference. And sometimes it will be just, a character who is, has a Michigan bumper sticker on their car. It finally I just was like, I'm done hiding it. So the President of the United States in the last 3 books, guess what school he went to? That's right. I was like, screw it. I'm like, if I'm going to be loud and proud and we're going to have to make the president go somewhere, he's going to Michigan, which is great. The funny part is when I write the books, the last thing I do, I don't care. Like, I know it sounds so stupid, but what people are wearing. In fact, when I wrote it, that got published, the editor wrote back to me, Brad, I read the new draft, it's great, but I've realized every person, you don't describe what a single person is wearing. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about it. Of course you have to. I just didn't think because I was just racing with the dialogue. And so every day when I was rewriting it, whatever I was wearing, I would just look down and see what I was wearing, and then I would put it on the character. And so the editor was like, Brad, every character in this book is wearing old jeans and a Michigan t-shirt. And I was like, isn't that how people dress? I just had no idea. So exactly, there is nothing wrong with that, especially on Fox. And see how I did that together? Made it up right here. That was fast. And you got to put a button on your joke or else the bow doesn't stay. So I love that I get to hide Michigan in those books. I really love it because sometimes you go to a signing. I remember the first signing I did in this state. And this guy came up to me, and I went to sign his book. And he said, can I give you my pen? I said, sure. And it was a click pen. And I clicked the pen, and it started playing the Victors. And I was like, we'll put another Michigan reference in the next one. Yes?
Do you write, when you start to write your book, you write on a piece of paper and then you put it on a computer, or you start just write on the computer? See, computers are vulnerable. You can lose the whole thing.
No, thank you for scaring me to death, sir. So the question is you can risk your life trying to put something on a computer, but you will pay. The question is do I handwrite it or do I write it right on a computer? And I do. I actually do handwrite the outlines. So when I start a book, I know the ending. I always know who done it. I know who the bad guy is. I know how that severed arm got into the White House Rose Garden. I know exactly who put it there when I start. Now, I don't know everyone working with them. I don't know all the motivations. And I don't know all the bad guys. Some will change. Some will switch sides. Some will move around. That's the fun of the year and a half it takes to write a book. But what I do know is I know who done it. And then I just start outlining about 50 to 100 pages at a time. And those I do in a little notebook. And I write just little outlines and we'll plot those out. And then I'll write those 50 to 100 pages. There is one person I need to acknowledge here today is when I do that, eventually I get to a scene and I never get to thank him, but he's here today. So whenever you see anyone maimed or killed or something horrible or they're sick, the person that I call is my friend Lee Benjamin, who's in the front row here. So Lee, you got to stand up. I got to embarrass you. Come on, stand up. You're in the acknowledgments. This is him. Lee is the greatest killer in the room today. He is a doctor, and so whenever I need a good death, I call my friend Lee. I dial, I call here, and then I plot, and I get to that scene where someone's brain, does this, or someone hits a car accident. How would that hurt?
Or someone's teeth are doing something really
or someone's
gross.
teeth is doing, exactly. Whatever it might be, whatever that horror is. Lee is the first call I make, and I give him the best messages because I'm like, Lee, I need to kill someone today. Call me back, and he knows I'm not joking. And but I want to thank him publicly because he always makes time for imaginary friends.
But he's a great doctor.
But he is a great doctor. That's right.
Doctor.
Jason pushing the fact that if you need a doctor, Lee Benjamin's your man. If you need emergency medicine, you call Dr. Benjamin.
Brett, final question for us tonight. Yeah, round of applause.
That's right.
What's ahead for you? I assure more adventures for Beecher?
So as I said, we do I Am Lucille Ball, we do I Am Helen Keller, and then we do I Am Martin Luther King Jr. Then will be the next thriller. It will not be a Beecher book. I'm actually doing a new one because I've just spent 1,500 pages with him. I knew what his arc was going to be. I knew what this was. But you better believe I want to have this cast back, and I love the archives and the Culper ring. So they will be back, hopefully, in the book after that. And then, so that's going to basically put up 4 books next year, and then after that, I'm going to take a nap. And then, but with that said, is that good? So with that said, let me say again the most important thing I can say, and that is to say thank you. And I say that because of this is the place that gave me my start. If I didn't come here, I'm not the writer. I don't get to sit on this stage. If I didn't come to this state, I'm not sitting here now. I know that. I acknowledge that. And it's because of your university system in this great state. And there are many, listen, we do not root against the Spartans either. We go Big Ten. As long as they're not playing us, I don't care. But we root for this state really hard. And in fact, they tried to cut Michigan from the tour. They cut Boston. They cut Atlanta because they wanted me to go to new places. People were like, you've never been to the city. Please come here. And the only state beyond New York and D.C. and Florida, which is where I live, and that's where we have to launch because the publisher's there and all the media's there. The only state that we repeated and that I fought for was this one. And it was very important to me. And the reason I tell you this is I want you to also think, again, not just of why I'm here, but it makes me think what I was talking about before about how we can all change the world. And to me, I want you to again think of that teacher, the Miss Spicer that I told you about, or Miss Sherman that I told you about, but think of your version of them. Think of that teacher who took a chance on you, the first person who gave you your first real job. Think of the first person that told you were good at something. And I want you to thank them. That's it. That's all I ask. When we're done here, I'll sign all the books, we'll do everything, we'll have fun. When you leave here, go and thank them. I promise you, you will never believe what comes from it. You will create brand new history. So thank you for letting me be a part of your history. I appreciate you all coming here tonight.
Brad, thank you very much.